The morning sun rose gently over 𝐸𝐮𝐬𝐾𝐭, spilling its golden light across the red soil of the Benin Empire's frontier town. Smoke curled lazily from the huts, drums beat faintly in the distance, and the chants of women at the stream drifted on the breeze. It was a land proud of its traditions, where the spirits of the ancestors were worshipped in shrines carved from sacred 𝐿𝐿𝐾 wood, and where every drumbeat was believed to echo into the world of the gods. Yet, on this day, the town gathered in silence around the small red earth-walled church at the edge of the village square. Inside, Father Mateo, the Catholic priest sent from across the seas, stood with sweat trickling down his neck. His robe, once pure white, was now stained with the red dust of 𝐸𝐮𝐬𝐾. Before him sat men and women of the village, their eyes watchful, their faces expressionless. He lifted the crucifix high. "My people," he began in a voice heavy with desperation, "the God I bring you is greater than your ancestors, greater than the idols you serve. He is love, He is light, He is salvation. Accept Him and you shall live forever." A murmur rippled through the crowd. At the front, an old man with scarred cheeks, 𝐸𝐻𝐫𝐫, the chief priest of the land, rose slowly to his feet. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of the ancestors. "Father," he said, "we do not mock you. We see your passion. But why should we abandon the gods who shaped this soil, who gave us yam, who hear our drums, who look like us? Why should we bow to a God who came from the sea, carried by men whose tongues stumble on our names? A God whose image does not carry our skin, our eyes, our blood?" The crowd hummed in agreement. Father Mateo felt his heart sink. For months he had tried, preaching at the market square, gathering children under the mango tree, teaching songs of worship, but each time the villagers listened politely and returned to their shrines. His words bounced off hearts hardened by centuries of faith in their ancestors. Yet among the crowd, his eyes fell on her, Amaka. She sat quietly at the edge, her eyes bright, her headscarf the color of ripe palm fruit. She was not like the others. She came often to listen, though she never spoke. When she sang along to his hymns, her voice was soft, like water flowing over smooth stones. That morning, as the villagers murmured and turned away from his sermon, her gaze lingered on him longer than the rest. A gaze that warmed him more than the rising sun ever could. That evening, Father Mateo walked alone toward the edge of the forest where the shrines stood. He could hear the rattling of cowries, the chants of 𝐸𝐻𝐫𝐫, invoking the ancestors, and the pounding of drums that seemed to mock the bell of his little church. "Lord," he whispered, clutching the crucifix tight, "why have you sent me here? Why do their hearts remain closed? Am I failing you?" The wind rustled the trees, and for a fleeting moment he thought he heard laughter, not divine laughter, but that of the forest spirits who belonged to 𝐸𝐮𝐬𝐾 long before he arrived. As he turned back toward the village, he saw her again. Amaka was walking with a clay pot balanced gracefully on her head. She stopped when she noticed him, lowering her eyes respectfully. "Father," she greeted softly. "Peace be with you, Amaka," he replied, his voice faltering for reasons he could not name. They stood in silence, the weight of unspoken words between them. Then she smiled faintly, and in that smile, something inside him trembled. He looked away quickly, crossing himself as though to chase away the thought. But the thought remained. The days turned to weeks, and the battle between faiths grew fiercer. The more he preached, the more the villagers resisted. Mothers pulled their children away from his songs. Hunters spat on the ground when they passed his church. At the palace, the chiefs warned the people, "Do not abandon the gods of your forefathers for a strange god of the sea." Father Mateo grew weary. His sermons became hollow, his prayers restless. Yet, when Amaka entered the church, a strange fire returned to him. Her presence filled the small, red, earth-walled chapel with a light no candle could provide. She asked him questions about heaven, about forgiveness, about love. And he answered, though each word tied knots in his soul. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon and the village prepared for the yam festival, Amaka lingered after service. The church was empty, and the air thick with silence. "Father," she asked, her voice low, "this God you preach, does he punish love?" He froze. "Why do you ask such a thing?" She looked at him then, her eyes steady, searching his face, as though she could see into his heart. "Because," she whispered, "I feel something I should not feel. Something that makes me afraid." The crucifix felt suddenly heavy in his hand. His mouth opened, but no words came. The truth was there, raw and undeniable. He felt it too. At that moment, the sound of drums rose from the village square, celebrating the ancestors, their beats echoing against the church walls, like a warning. Father Mateo turned away. But inside him, a battle fiercer than any war of empires had begun. The new Yam festival came with fire and color. Drums thundered through the night, dancers moved in circles around the sacred grove, and the air was rich with the smell of roasted yams and palm wine. Torches lit the paths, and children laughed as they chased one another between the huts. Father Mateo watched from the doorway of his lonely church. His small bell could not compete with the booming drums, nor could his hymns drown out the ancestral chants that rolled like thunder across 𝐸𝐶𝐫𝐸𝐿. He felt invisible, a man crying into the wind. Yet, as his eyes swept over the celebrating crowd, he saw her, Amaka. She danced gracefully among the maidens, her waist swaying in rhythm with the drums, her laughter carried on the night air. Around her neck hung cowries strung with red beads, symbols of fertility and beauty in her people's tradition. Something inside him stirred, fierce and dangerous. He turned away, gripping the wooden pew so tightly that his knuckles whitened. "Lord, why have you placed this trial before me?" he prayed desperately. But the prayer felt empty, as though heaven had shut its doors. The next morning, Amaka came to the church with her clay pot. She claimed she wanted to fetch water from the well beside the chapel, but Mateo knew better. Her eyes lingered on him longer than they should. "Father," she said softly, "you always stand alone when the drums call. Does your God forbid you from joining us?" He forced a smile. "My God calls me to a different song." She tilted her head, her eyes playful yet sad. "And is his song sweeter than the one of your heart?" The question cut deep. He wanted to tell her yes, that his God's song was sweeter, eternal. But the truth pressed against his chest until he could hardly breathe. Instead, he looked away. 𝐸𝐴𝐵𝐾, some paths are forbidden. Even if they lead to happiness? She asked. He had no answer. Word spread quickly through the village. The chief priest, 𝐸𝐴𝐵𝐾, warned the people. This foreigner brings confusion. He speaks of a god of love, yet his heart trembles for one of our maidens. Can you not see? Even he cannot resist the power of the spirits that dwell in our land. The elders nodded, muttering among themselves. Some said it was only a matter of time before the priest abandoned his strange god and bowed to the ancestors. Others whispered that 𝐸𝐴𝐵𝐾 was bewitched, that no good could come from her closeness to the foreign priest. Her mother scolded her, forbidding her to attend the church again. You will not shame this family, 𝐸𝐴𝐵𝐾. What can that man give you? His God is not ours. His blood is not ours. Leave him before the spirits curse you. But 𝐸𝐴𝐵𝐾's heart had already strayed. One quiet evening, Father Mateo found her waiting by the stream. The air was heavy with the scent of night flowers, and the moonlight made her skin glow like polished bronze. You should not be here, he whispered, though his steps carried him closer. I could say the same to you, she replied, her smile trembling with both fear and desire. For a long moment they stood in silence, the sound of the water gurgling between them. Then, unable to hold back any longer, Mateo reached for her hand. It was warm, alive, real, far more real than the crucifix that suddenly felt cold against his chest. 𝐸𝐴𝐵𝐾. His voice broke. This is wrong. I swore vows before God. But your heart, she asked softly, did it swear the same? The question shattered his defenses. The truth, sharp and merciless, blazed inside him. He loved her. And when her lips brushed his, that night by the stream, the world seemed to fall away. For the first time since he arrived in 𝐸𝐴𝐫𝐾, he felt alive. But love in forbidden soil does not stay hidden for long. Children whispered of seeing the priest and 𝐸𝐴𝐵𝐾 walking together. Hunters claimed they saw them by the stream, their hands too close for innocence. When word reached the elders, outrage swept the village. 𝐸𝐴𝐵𝐾 stood before the people at the square. Behold, he thundered, the man of the foreign god has fallen. If his God cannot keep his servant pure, how can that God save us? He preaches holiness, yet he burns with desire like any mortal man. Do you not see? His faith is a lie. The villagers roared their agreement. Mothers pulled their daughters close, as though the priest carried a plague. The church bell that once rang faintly over the village now tolled into emptiness. No one came. Father Mateo felt the weight of shame crush him. His sermons were ignored, his prayers mocked. Even the crucifix seemed to stare at him with silent judgment. Yet, when 𝐸𝐴𝐾 slipped into the chapel at dusk, her eyes filled with love and fear, he could not turn her away. One night, he fell on his knees before the altar. Lord, forgive me. I have broken my vows, but what am I to do? My words fall on deaf ears, my mission is in ruins, and my heart belongs to her. Did you send me here for this? Did you know this would be my fate? His tears fell on the dusty floor. No answer came. The silence of heaven weighed heavier than the anger of men. The next morning, he made his choice. When the villagers gathered at the square, he stood before them. not in his priestly robes, but in a simple cloth tied around his waist. Like any man of the land, his voice trembled, yet carried with it the force of release. "My people," he said, "I came to you with the message of a God you did not know. I asked you to abandon your ancestors, but you refused. I see now your hearts belong to this soil, to the spirits of your fathers. I cannot force you, and I can no longer stand before you as a priest. My heart has betrayed my vows. I resign from this mission. I am no longer a priest of the church." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some laughed, others murmured in shock. Odozi lifted his staff high. "You see," he cried, "even he bows to the power of our land." But Amaka, standing at the edge of the crowd, felt only the pounding of her heart. She knew then that the man she loved had chosen her, not just with words, but with his very life. The village square buzzed for days after Father Mateo's shocking declaration. The priest who once stood proud in his white robe was now just a man among men. Some mocked him, others pitied him, but most shook their heads and said, "This is why we never trusted the foreign god." Even his servant could not remain pure. The small red earth-walled church quickly fell into ruin. Goats wandered through its doorway. Its bell rusted silent, and weeds grew tall around its altar. Children who once peeked curiously inside now ran past laughing, imitating the priest's broken Edo with playful mockery. But Amaka saw none of that. She saw only the man who had given up everything for her. At first, the villagers were suspicious. They whispered that Amaka was bewitched, that no woman could have lured a man of the gods unless she carried charms hidden in her waist beads. Her mother wept, insisting that the ancestors would curse the family for her disobedience. "Amaka," her mother pleaded one night, "he is not one of us. He has no land, no ancestors here. Even if he stays, where will you plant your yams? Which spirits will protect your children? Think, my daughter." But Amaka's heart was set. She answered calmly, "Mother, love is its own protection. If the ancestors gave me this love, can they curse me for accepting it?" Her mother shook her head, muttering prayers to the gods of the household shrine. Mateo, too, faced trials. Without the church's support, he had no food, no home, no purpose. His hands, soft from years of holding books and crosses, blistered when he tried to farm. He stumbled, carrying yams, failed to set traps, and burned his hands cooking with firewood. The villagers laughed, calling him Igbo, meaning white men. But he did not give up. Slowly, he learned. He joined the men at the farms, listening more than speaking. He carried water, fetched firewood, and humbled himself to the rhythm of the village. The children, once mocking, now followed him with curiosity, giggling when he tried to speak their language. Amaka taught him the proverbs of her people, the songs of the maidens, and the ways of the market. She guided his hands as he learned to pound yam, teased him when he fumbled with palm kernels, and laughed until tears rolled when he attempted the traditional dances. Bit by bit, he stopped being the foreign priest and became simply Mateo, the man who loved Amaka. But Odozi, the chief priest, was not convinced. "This man is dangerous," he warned the elders. "He abandoned his God, yes, but his presence still weakens our children's faith. They look at him and see that even gods can be deserted. And what of the girl? If she binds herself to him, our blood will be mixed with strangers. The ancestors will not be pleased. The elders muttered in agreement. Some argued that Matteo should be sent away. Others said he would destroy himself eventually, so why waste energy? Still, Odozi's eyes followed Matteo with suspicion, waiting for the day the ancestors would strike. One evening, during a village gathering, a violent storm struck. Thunder boomed, lightning split the sky, and rain poured so heavily that huts leaked and fires died. Panic spread. Such storms were often seen as signs from the gods. Odozi seized the moment. Standing in the rain, he lifted his staff. "Behold," he cried, his voice rising above the thunder. "This storm comes because we harbor one who has abandoned his god and mocks our ancestors. Unless we cleanse the land, disaster will not leave us." The villagers, already frightened, murmured in fear. Eyes turned toward Matteo, who stood drenched beside Amaka. Matteo raised his hands desperately. "No, the storm is not because of me. Rain comes to water the land, not to curse it. Your ancestors and my God both know the seasons. This is not punishment." But his words were drowned by the thunder and the people's fear. It was Amaka who stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Are the gods so small," she asked, "that one man can shake them? If our ancestors are mighty, then let them prove it. If they are angry, let them speak themselves. Why blame Matteo for what the sky decides?" Her boldness silenced the crowd. Even Odozi faltered, for the storm began to ease as suddenly as it had come. The people muttered uncertainly, unwilling to challenge the fearless young woman. From that day, whispers spread not of Matteo, but of Amaka, the maiden who defied the chief priest. But their love was not without cost. Families began to avoid them. Traders gave them higher prices at the market. When Matteo tried to join the men in hunting, they left him behind. The weight of isolation pressed heavily on him, yet Amaka's laughter and stubborn courage kept him standing. One night, lying beneath the stars, Matteo turned to her. "Amaka, I left everything for you. My vows, my God, my people. But sometimes I fear, what if your people never accept us? What if I remain an outcast until I die?" She touched his face gently. "Then let us be outcasts together. Better a true love in exile than a hollow life in a crowd." Her words gave him strength. Still, he prayed in secret, though not to the distant God he once served, nor to the ancestors he did not fully know. He prayed to love itself, that mysterious force greater than gods and empires. Months turned into years. Matteo's skin darkened under the sun, his Edo tongue grew smoother, and his hands grew calloused with work. He was no longer the strange priest from across the seas. He was Amaka's man, the farmer who laughed at himself, the one who still could not climb a palm tree, without slipping but tried anyway. Their love grew deep, blessed with quiet moments, sharing roasted yam at sunset, singing softly by the fire, and telling stories beneath the moon. Yet the shadow of rejection never lifted fully. Some said the ancestors had turned their faces away from Amaka's family. Her younger brother fell sick, and neighbors whispered it was the curse of her forbidden love. When the family's harvest failed one year, tongues wagged again. Her mother, weary with grief, finally confronted Matteo. You have taken my daughter's heart, but you have stolen her peace. Leave us, Matteo. Go back to the seas that brought you. Do not drag us into ruin. Matteo fell silent, shame burning in his chest. But Amaka stood firm, her eyes blazing. Mother, my peace is with him. If the ancestors curse me, let them do it. I will not abandon love for fear. Her words carried the strength of generations of women who had defied silence. Even Matteo, once a man of holy vows, marveled at her courage. Yet deep down, Matteo knew the battle was not over. He had laid down the cross, but he carried another burden, the weight of belonging nowhere. The church had cast him aside. The villagers held him at arm's length, and the ancestors he tried to honor looked at him with suspicion. Between two worlds, he was neither priest nor true son of the soil. He was only Matteo, a man bound by love, to a woman whose defiance carried them both against the tide of tradition. And in 𝐸𝐶𝐫𝐸𝐾𝐿, under the shadow of the Benin Empire, such a tide could never be resisted forever.